We are looking very briefly live at Ottawa because it's obscured by bad weather, obviously, in the nation's capital. But we do know that today MPs will vote on the Conservative motion of non-confidence, the first attempt by the official opposition to topple the minority Liberal government. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre introduced that motion yesterday in the House and urged other parties to vote for it. But we already know the NDP and the Bloc will not support the motion. We do expect the Conservatives to introduce further confidence motions if this one fails. They have many opportunities, including one tomorrow where we expect a similar motion to be introduced. There's a lot to talk about in all of this, and we're going to do that in studio, no less.
Here I am.
In person. Chris Hall, our former national affairs editor, he's now in the private sector, a managing principal at Navigator, but watching the political scene very closely. It's great to have you here.
I'm glad to be here.
Come back anytime. We have lots of political things to talk about. You're not expecting any September surprise or anything, are you?
No, not a lot of drama.
No, you think NDP and Bloc will indeed vote against this afternoon?
And you know, interestingly enough, people are looking at this as a kind of a one-off, like, oh, a non-confidence motion, the first one. But as part of a longer-term strategy, yes, there will be another non-confidence motion worded differently tomorrow that will be debated. It's the second of the 5 days that the Conservatives get. And I thought what was interesting yesterday was that Poilievre laid out the case to Canadians, maybe for the first time that people were watching in his entirety about what he would do if elected.
Yeah, very campaign style, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and what needs to change. But I'm not sure they expected the other opposition members, Yves-François Blanchet and Jagmeet Singh, to attack him specifically. So I think it's interesting to watch how that unfolds. Bloc thinks they can get something from the government by negotiating over OAS, increasing the payments for people who are aged 65 to 74. The NDP wants pharmacare through, but you know, these are things that can take some time. Chrystia Freeland said she is talking about these issues, but I wouldn't be in any hurry to make a decision. I'd wait at least until the fall economic statement before making a firm commitment.
Okay, let's talk about that in a little bit more detail. But just in terms of tomorrow, maybe worded differently, but the substance is same. The substance is essentially the same. The people of the House have lost confidence in the government. So again, tomorrow, regardless of what happens today, we'll get another non-confidence motion and another vote. And one would expect, in all of the 5 that the Conservatives had, they're going to do some variant on the wording of all this. What's the strategy there? Or Janice was mentioning, is it the law of diminishing returns every time they bring this forward? They
want to give Jagmeet Singh as many opportunities as possible to vote with the government, to put a kind of a lie, if I can put it that way, to the ripping up of the supply and confidence agreement that the NDP still will substantially support on major issues, will support the government no matter what. So that's the long-term goal. I don't think it also hurts from the Conservative point of view, and certainly that's what I was hearing from them yesterday, to see the Bloc Québécois, a separatist party, voting for a government that's led by a Trudeau, the son of the most famous federalist in this country. So they like some of the images around that. How they work or how long at last, we'll have to wait and see. But for now, I think they're happy with the way they are trying to present the opposition parties, their colleagues on the opposition benches, as really supportive of the federal government.
What are you seeing so far in this new reality with no supply and confidence agreement from Yves-François Blanchet? Because he has pushed for more for seniors' benefits, and we heard Chrystia Freeland yesterday in that economic update saying, talking as you say, but he wants it extended even more, and there's a party has a private member's bill before the House right now. How do you see him positioning himself, and to what end?
Remember 2 years or 3 years ago, 2021, when he was elected, he said the goal of the Bloc was to represent the will of the National Assembly in Quebec. That was when François Legault, the Premier, was riding high in the polls. Not so popular now, and suddenly Blanchet and the Bloc are their own masters of their own destiny. So, yes, I think he can probably get something on the OAS, the changes we talked about from 65 to 74. It'll cost $16 billion, and we know the government is pretty much A, tapped out, and 2, that kind of spending tends to be inflationary, and we just wrestled.
Economists don't really like that.
They don't like it at all. So I think that they believe they can get supply management. There's also a bill in the Senate right now which make that immune or exempt from any future trade deals, from having any changes made to it. And obviously they think that temporary foreign workers and other immigration policies should be really left in the hands of the provincial government. Conservatives are far more likely to do that. They're the ones that believe in having the provinces with real powers, with less federal intrusion. But as it stands right now, the only people who to be talking are the Liberals, the Bloc, and the NDP. The Conservatives are happy to go it alone.
I want to talk about the dynamic,
right.
Conservative and NDP notably, as you said, with some of this, the Conservatives trying to force Jagmeet Singh's hand and you know, to vote with the government despite tearing up that agreement. What do you think, as you watch from afar now, of sort of the tone and tenor? We have watched in recent days, I mean, we're going to play a little bit of a tape from the end of last week, but you have Pierre Poilievre really calling out Jagmeet Singh, calling him names in the House, and coming, you know, pretty aggressive moments with Jagmeet Singh actually leaving his seat, according to reports.
Yeah.
So let's play some of this in terms of what set this off at the end of last week, and then we'll talk about this further.
He is a fake, a phony, and a fraud. How can anyone ever believe what this sellout NDP leader says in the future?
So then it went on from there, and we didn't have cameras in that right position. They weren't just showing where Singh was.
Right.
But, you know, he went moved, and the reports were from a number of MPs, I'm right here, bro, you know, that kind of exchange. Is this the lowest or the most tense that you have witnessed? I mean, you were 24 years on the Hill, so that you probably saw some low points too, but what do you think of what you're seeing now?
Yeah, I remember Reg Alcock, a former Liberal MP, and Peter MacKay going outside and going toe-to-toe as they were a challenge to a fight. I think the tone is bad. I really do. The Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre are using language that I don't think we've seen before in Parliament. Sellout, fraud, phony. But it is part of the effort to undermine the credibility of the NDP. As you know, the NDP and the Conservatives are very competitive in some seats in the West. We talked about this the last time I was on.
In the by-election,
so,
1 and 2.
Absolutely true, right? They closed that gap in Elmwood, Transcona, and Winnipeg by quite a margin. So I think he understands that if he continues to undermine Jagmeet Singh's reputation and the NDP's force as an opposition party, that will play out better for him and the Conservatives in the long run. But to your point about tone and tenor, the Liberals came in, remember, sunny ways. They weren't going to heckle. They weren't going to be obstructionist. And now I think what we see is that there's just a tired government, a tired opposition, and tensions and motions are at the very cutting edge of being frayed. So I think we're going to see a lot more of this.
A lot more. Do you have concerns about, because we had that episode for Jagmeet Singh outside of Parliament when people took up some of that language and actually confronted them, and then he confronted those protesters on the Hill. I mean, Greg Fergus is trying his best to keep a lid on this, the Speaker of the House, but concerns about if this escalates further.
There have been stories by CBC and others about the number of threats that individual MPs face, how they're being accosted outside their riding offices and the like. So yeah, I think what we see in the House of Commons is a reflection, or is reflective what we see in the public. It's okay to assail politicians, to call them cowards or to call them sellouts behind their backs, as we saw with Jagmeet Singh that time before he turned around. And I don't think that's great for politics. I think it's been tense before. I mean, I didn't live through, as an adult, what happened in Quebec in the 70s, but there were obviously concerns then too. So I don't think we're there, but at the same time, if politicians treat each other with such disrespect and have so little time for each other, and it goes on all sides, that's going to be reflected in the population. That can't be a good thing.
Chris, thank you.